Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mikey McNuggets, aka Mike Lucas, coming at you on a Thursday afternoon. It is June the 12th. The Indiana Pacers are now beating the Oklahoma City Thunder 2-1 in the NBA Finals, and we are in silly season when it comes to offseason rumors. There is one rumor in particular that has popped up in the last 48 hours or so that I felt was worth addressing here because it involves a name that you all know. It involves some potentially fun trade scenarios. And it also involves a player that, in a world where any of these deals were even slightly realistic, I think would solve a lot of problems for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So let's dive right into it. Brett Siegel of Clutch Points has reported that the Cavaliers have at least poked around and done their due diligence to see if Kevin Durant, the former MVP, the multi-time All-NBA player, one of the 25 greatest players to ever walk the earth, would be interested in teaming up with Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley in Cleveland for the last chapter of his career. It has been well reported by numerous people, including Shams, Windhorst, Bill Simmons, Zach Lowe, that the worst kept secret in the NBA as we approach the NBA draft is that Kevin Durant is going to play next season on a team other than the Phoenix Suns. He is going to get traded. There is almost no scenario where Kevin Durant returns to Phoenix. And the teams that most have kind of connected Durant to are the San Antonio Spurs, the Houston Rockets, the Miami Heat, the Knicks, and the Timberwolves. Those are the five teams that have been mostly out there as teams that make sense on paper. But what about the Cleveland Cavaliers? Like I mentioned, Brett Siegel of Clutch Points has reported they've at least reached out to Phoenix, trying to do some due diligence. And before we dive into what a trade package for Kevin Durant might look like, it's worth mentioning two things. At this stage of his career, Kevin Durant is probably going to pick his next and final destination. He's going to pick which team he eventually ends up getting traded to. Now, I don't necessarily think that's how Phoenix should handle the situation. But after all the reports that there was almost a deal between Phoenix and Minnesota at the trade deadline and Durant was caught completely off guard by that, it feels like this time they are working much more closely with the front office to get a result that is happy to both sides. Durant goes to the team he wants. Phoenix gets a package back they feel is acceptable for a player of Kevin Durant's status. It's also worth mentioning that Durant is technically entering the final year of his deal. He's due to make $54 million next season. According to reports, he hopes to sign a 2-year, $120 million extension, which whatever team he gets traded to, it's a lot of money for a player of Durant's age. However, that is the current going rate for a max player in the NBA. And 3, there's the whole Matt Ishbia, Dan Gilbert issue between Phoenix and Cleveland. Those are the two owners of the teams. They are business rivals in the real estate business. They frankly have said publicly they cannot stand each other. They despise each other. That is partly what made the Jordanot hiring for Phoenix, poaching Cleveland's top assistant to be the new Suns head coach, was so interesting last week. So those are all the components at play before we dive into the trade. Would Durant want to come to Cleveland? I don't know. Would Ishbia and Dan Gilbert sit down and facilitate a deal of this caliber? Who knows? Would Cleveland be willing to give Durant the extension he's looking for? Who knows? But for the sake of today, let's pretend all those answers are yes. Let's pretend Durant would go to Cleveland, would be willing to accept a deal to Cleveland. Let's pretend Cleveland would be willing to give him that $120 million 2-year extension he is speaking, or something along those lines. Let's say Cleveland now catapults to the top of his list. How would a deal for Kevin Durant work, and would it solve the Cavaliers' biggest questions, their biggest issues? Well, let's look at a couple different frameworks of the deal. To start, both Cleveland and Phoenix are going to be second apron teams next season. At least as of right now, what their current cap sheet looks like, they'd both be second apron teams. And as part of being a second apron team, you cannot take on a single penny more than you give out. So in this case, for the Cavs to make a deal for Kevin Durant straight up, they'd have to have a player that made $54.1 million as well. As a second apron team, they can't aggregate salaries. So there is no simple Cavaliers player for Phoenix player deal in place. It is literally impossible to execute under the second apron of the NBA's CBA. So that means it's either a 3-team trade or one of either Phoenix or Cleveland would have to get under the second apron in a prior deal before they can work on a one-on-one deal. What's more realistic, however, is a three-team deal, a three-team scenario. I came up with two separate three-team scenarios that A, make sense on paper, and B, work under the second apron, work under the first apron, and are actually cap compliant. So I'm going to put these two trades up. I want you to tell me, would you do it? Who says no? The first one is a three-team deal between the Cavs, the Suns, and the Nets. In this hypothetical three-team deal, the Cavs would get Kevin Durant. The Suns would get Jared Allen, DeAndre Hunter, and Isaac Okoro. And to help facilitate the deal, the Cavs would unload Max Strus, Craig Porter Jr., and some future second-round picks to the Brooklyn Nets in order for Cleveland to aggregate the salaries to match Durant's salary. In this instance, the Cavs would drop down from a second apron team to a first apron team. They would be hard capped on the back end, but they'd be sacrificing a lot of depth for Kevin Durant. However, in this instance, this would give you some kind of lineup of Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, Evan Mobley, and you fill the rest with whoever you can fill the rest with. That is a hell of a top four. Garland and Mitchell, Durant and Mobley, that's four of the top 30 players in the NBA. And you figure out the rest with depth. Maybe it's a Jalen Tyson. Maybe you want a big, a true big, if you're not ready to move Mobley to the 5 full time. Maybe you want some more shooting. You can mix and match, pick and choose, but the Cavs would be sacrificing a ton of depth in this scenario to get Kevin Durant. Another three-team deal I came up with that involves the Cavs, the Suns, and another team that works under the cap is a deal with the Sacramento Kings, a team we had heard earlier in the week was rumored to have interest in Darius Garland. Apparently, Sacramento is looking to upgrade its point guard position. Darius may or may not be on the move after the toe injury. It could look something along the lines of this. The Cavs would get Durant and Jonas Valanciunas. The Suns would get Jared Allen, Keegan Murray, Malik Monk. And the Kings would get Darius Garland, Isaac Okoro, and Dean Wade. That deal works for all three teams. Durant and Valanciunas to the Cavs. Garland, Okoro, and Wade to Sacramento. The Suns get some much-needed cap relief. They get Jared Allen, a young and up-and-comer, and Keegan Murray, and Malik Monk, who is a very valuable, efficient six-man-ish in today's NBA. So those are two different frameworks. I'll show you the first deal again. The Nets, the Suns, the Cavs, Durant to Cleveland, Strus and Craig Porter Jr. to Brooklyn with some future second-round picks as a salary dumping spot so the Cavs could aggregate Jared Allen, DeAndre Hunter, and Isaac Okoro salaries to match Kevin Durant's. The other three-team deal involved the Kings, Durant and Valanciunas coming back to Cleveland. The Suns would get Jared Allen, Keegan Murray, and Malik Monk. The Kings in this scenario would get Darius Garland, Isaac Okoro, and Dean Wade. So you're giving up both Garland and Allen in this situation, but you are getting back Jonas Valanciunas instead. Two options. The question is, does that solve the Cavs' biggest issues? Would Kevin Durant be the answer to what Cleveland lacked in the postseason against Indiana this year? What Cleveland lacked in the postseason against Boston last year? What Cleveland lacked in the postseason against New York 2 seasons ago? On the one hand, I think the answer is yes. Yes, it is. The Cavs' issue hasn't necessarily been on the defensive end of the court. We've talked at length. The Cavs' issue this year and last year in particular was they couldn't score in the playoffs. And you'd be adding, even at his elder age, one of the greatest scorers in the history of the NBA. A player in Kevin Durant who may not still be in his prime, but is still an absolutely lethal scorer from all three levels. He doesn't get to the paint nearly as much as he has in the past, but from the mid-range, from three, he is still a legitimate assassin, a sniper. You name it, Durant is that. And my biggest complaint with the Cavs in the playoffs against Indiana this season was that when Indiana decided, we are not going to help off your drives, we are not going to allow Donovan to become a playmaker, we are going to force Donovan to shoot over our bigger defenders, we are going to force Mobley and Allen and Hunter and a hobbled Garland to attack us one-on-one and beat us one-on-one. They had no counter. It was threes and it was porous layup attempts. They had no mid-range. They had no post-up. They could have gone to Evan Mobley more. I'm still not sure a month later why they didn't, but the Cavs were unable to counter what Indiana was forcing them to do. When you have a player like Kevin Durant on the court, who at 6'10, 6'11, 7 foot, we'll never know how tall he really is, with his ability to isolate and score, it is incredibly difficult to go through these kind of scoring droughts that Cleveland did in the playoffs. Why? Because you have, once again, one of the 3 or 4 best scorers in the history of the league getting these good looks. And if you're going to take away threes and you're not going to help off, it's one-on-one with Kevin Durant against whoever you put against him. And even at 37, 38 years old, I'm putting my money on Kevin Durant to score 4, 5, 6 out of 10 times, maybe 7, 8 at some nights when he's on fire. And Cleveland never had that counterpunch. They stuck to their offense. And in a way, I respect their tenacity and willingness to just keep running and running what had worked. But there was never the counter. Indiana countered. They changed their defensive philosophy. Cleveland never adjusted. And I think Durant is essentially the slump buster. Your offense that is slump proof when you have a guy in Kevin Durant, especially in a playoff series where it is more difficult than ever to generate good looks for others, where you can just put him in the high post and say, KD, go to work. And I don't love that style of basketball for 48 minutes. I still think you need motion. I still think you need movement. You need playmaking. You need ball handles. You need all of that. You need shooting. But when you're in a bit of a dry spell, you need a guy who can get a bucket. And Donovan Mitchell, for as good as he was in that playoff series, was putting so much stress on his body. His usage rate was through the roof. It was the highest in the entire postseason. He wore down. You know how you can save him some possessions on the offensive end? Have him dump it down to Kevin Durant, and clear out and take a 20-second rest while Durant goes to work. He can be a pick and roll ball handler. He can be a screener in a pick and pop scenario. He could work alongside Evan Mobley in some sort of big to big screen action, which would be a nightmare to guard. He's a nasty 3-point shooter, even at his advanced age. And he's good enough and skilled enough to handle the ball. Durant solves a lot of the issues that the Cavs had in the postseason this year. However, if you make a move like that, you're banking on a 37-year-old with a bit of an injury history to stay healthy, to not fall off a cliff, to not necessarily be as, I want to be very careful how I say this because Durant has gotten unhappy in each of the last 2 places he's gone, Brooklyn and Phoenix. He was unhappy at the end of his Golden State era too, but that's a bit of a different story. You're taking a risk on a guy who has been unhappy at the later stages of his career. And do you want to add that into a locker room that had vibes that were frankly immaculate last year? Immaculate vibes don't win you jack crap. But it's a risk when you bring in a guy that has a reputation of maybe not being the greatest, happiest teammate in the world. And there's nothing wrong with that because Durant is an all-time great player, but it's something you do have to consider. And are you willing to put that level of pressure and that load on a player of Durant's age, where he hasn't been at that peak level in a few years? Still damn good. Still an all-NBA caliber player, but he's not the MVP Kevin Durant we saw in the mid-2010s. And that's fine. That's what's supposed to happen as you age. The other part of this is if you make that deal, you're basically going all in for the next 2 seasons. We've talked about the Cavs having this 3-year window with its current roster, with the second apron restrictions and all that to win a championship. It was this postseason they failed. Now they have 2 more. They have 25, 26, and 26, 27. Is Durant the move that puts you all in and puts you over the top? Maybe. I kind of like it. I'm not going to lie. I could talk myself into it without a doubt. But I'm not 100% sure it's the smartest move. You're sacrificing depth. And we just talked about at length throughout this playoffs how depth is so crucial. How you need multiple guys, not 2 or 3 anymore, but 5, 6, 7 guys who you can count on in a playoff series. Is a 3-4-man team enough to win a championship anymore? I don't know. Indiana's breaking my brain, guys. I didn't think they had any chance in this series, and now they're up 2-1, and OKC has their backs against the wall in a must-win Game 4 on the road in one of the most hostile environments to play. Is it worth giving up that kind of depth? Is Durant, as a player, and he's clearly better than the guys the Cavs would be trading, is he worth 2 or 3, 4 of those guys in totality? I don't know. I have a gut feeling that Kobe Altman, the architect of this core 4, has put together the core four because he believes in the core four, and it'll be damned before he trades the core four and breaks it apart for something else, especially an elder player like Kevin Durant. But I'm enticed by the options, guys. I think offensively that would be incredibly difficult to stop. And I do think it would solve some of Cleveland's biggest issues that they had in the playoffs. Speaking of issues in the playoffs, part of the reason they struggled was Darius was hurt. And on Monday, we found out that Darius underwent surgery on his sprained big toe. He'll miss 4 to 5 months, which puts him in a timeline to return after the start of the regular season. It impacts his trade value without a doubt. You're not trading for 100% of Darius Garland anymore. You're getting 90, 85, who knows the exact number, but whoever deals for Darius is now getting a discounted price because you're not getting the full package. You're going to be trading for a point guard that will have missed all of training camp, all of the preseason, potentially the first 10, 15, 20 games of the regular season. So you're not going to pay full price for that. If you were in favor of trading Darius, now we have to readjust that trade compensation. And is that lowered compensation worth a top 30 player in the NBA? It still may be. I'm just speculating. I have no inside information that his price and his value would go down because of the injury. But I know if I was trading for a player who was injured, who would miss the start of the season, I'd be offering a lot less, or maybe not a lot, but I certainly would be offering less than I would have before I found out about the injury. On the flip side, the one good news to this injury, and you never want someone to get hurt, but you have to find silver linings. The one good thing is it is now in Evan Mobley's hands to be the second or first option in this offense until Darius comes back. And I've said it on this stream. I've said it on the Bleacher Report app. I've said it on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. For the Cavs to reach their highest heights, Evan Mobley has to become their best player. And he doesn't have to be their leading scorer per se to be their best player, but he does have to be more involved in the offensive end of the court. His usage rate in the playoffs cannot go down like it did against Indiana. It has to go the other way. It has to go up, 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 and not down. It went down 5% against the Pacers. I will never understand how Kenny Atkinson, how Darius Garland, how Donovan Mitchell allowed that to happen. I understand he was hurt, but the basic premise of we need more from Evan, not less in the playoffs makes no sense to me. Or it makes all the sense in the world. It makes no sense that they would think they need less. With Darius out of the equation, that's going to open up more shot opportunities, more facilitating opportunities, more playmaking opportunities, more opportunities to be the fulcrum of the offense, to run sets through Evan, to unlock another step to his offensive capabilities that we didn't see in year one under Kenny Atkinson. And it's a lot to put on his plate in year one to become a better shooter, to be more aggressive. We need you to play a new style of defense. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, both of them up, that year one under Kenny Atkinson, that was the first jump we saw from Evan. In year two, we're going to see a similar jump in different aspects of his game. He's still young, guys. Like, he's 23, turning 24. He still has a lot of room to grow. And now having this built-in excuse of playing a quarter of your season maybe without Darius will force Evan into the limelight. And then when Darius comes back, Darius can learn how to play off of Evan without changing what Evan's doing. Darius, for better or worse, is going to have to be the third option in this offense. You know, I'm not saying 40%, 25%, and 15%. I think it's more like 28, 27, and 22. But basically flip Darius's usage rate with Evan's usage rate, and I think you have a much better overall product for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Last point I want to make on the Indiana Pacers and how it relates to Cleveland. When Indy beat the Cavs in 5, we heard Donovan, we heard Jarrett, we heard the whole Cavs team said they were out of gas. And frankly, I felt that was kind of unacceptable. I understand they were dealing with injuries. I understand guys were playing more minutes. I understand all the context that goes into saying you're gassed. But it does feel crazy that an NBA team that spent so much time load managing, playing guys less, managing injuries, like being super precautious in the regular season, then got into the playoffs and just got ran off the court. And then we saw Indiana do the same thing to New York. And New York took the opposite approach to the regular season. Tibbs was playing his starters 40-plus minutes a game, while the Cavs were playing their guys barely over 30. And then we get to the NBA Finals. And game one, we saw Indiana with this furious fourth quarter comeback. Halliburton wins it on that last-second shot. They take a 1-0 lead. Game two, Oklahoma City comes back, and it looked like what we expected, a dominating performance from the team that was the best team in the regular season. And then in game three, by the end of the game, SGA and Jalen Williams and Lou Dort and Chet Holmgren looked completely exhausted. run down, worn out. It was a repeat. I thought my eyes were just showing me an old memory of the Cavs game, but no, it was Oklahoma City. And I don't understand how Indiana's style is so unique to where over the course of a 48-minute game, it wears you down to levels that nothing else can prepare you for. I can't wait to do a deep dive and talk to some guys this offseason to figure out how they are able to do something to a team like OKC that played 10 guys last night. Like 10 guys got real minutes. No one played an exuberant amount of minutes, and they were still dead tired when it mattered most. And it's a testament to Indiana. It's a baffling experience for OKC, and I thought it was just a Cavs issue at first. Then I was like, maybe there's something bigger to this after they did to New York. And seeing them do it to OKC, maybe it's just time we give Indiana a lot of credit, a lot more than we have in the past. They are on an all-time heater right now, and if they can pull this off, we'll go down as one of the most unlikely champions this league has ever seen. That's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of Cavaliers Weekly on the Bleacher Report app. If you liked what you heard, you can follow me on Twitter at MikeLucasTV. I'm on TV every day, Monday through Friday, at least 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Come find us there. It's a lot of fun. Appreciate you guys tuning in today. And remember, as always, go Cavs. Peace.